I was seated, the popcorn was out. And this book falls into the sort of messy women genre, and it got 2.5 stars. Don't sue me. And the girlies really came through with that one. I'm learning the choreo. You know, when you're looking at something and you're like, oh, but you can't look away. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you, it is. So yeah, you wouldn't catch me on a submarine. Weird you say? Marine biologist? Question mark? We love it. I'm what the girls would call a mood reader. Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. I'm Ray, what Ray reads. Follow me on Instagram. Yeah, you want to, you do. Thanks for clicking on the video and choosing to spend some time with me as I sit here, drink me water and ramble on about books. If you'd be a doll, why don't you just walk on over with your cursor and hit subscribe, because it helps me out and it helps the channel out, and do you know what, it'll help you out because I'll post videos and you'll watch them. So yeah, why don't you just go do that now? So if you clicked on the video, you know this is going to be me sharing what I read with you over the summer, over those summer months where I was enjoying very limited sunshine, may I add, as someone from the UK. But I did read some great books, so I thought, you know what, we're leaving the season, so I'm going to tell you what I read. I hope you all had a lovely summer, but as I mentioned, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but she's now over, she's cancelled. A new bitch has arrived and her name's Autumn, or Fall if you're American. Hibernation Mode, Gilmore Girls season, Rock Girl Autumn, whatever suits you. I'm a mixture of them all. So yeah, we're just going to go through each month, June, July, August. I was going to include some September, but it's kind of summer's over then, so no. It's just going to be June, July, August. I'll show you what I read, and I make myself laugh because usually I'll make a list and I'm like, these are the books I'm going to read in spring and summer. And she reads like none, because I'm a mood reader. I'm what the girls would call a mood reader. I do like the idea of having a sort of schedule of what I want to read and prioritising books that I want to read, but I like to keep it, you know. I'm more sort of, what's that called with the comedy where they're I'm improvising with what I'm in the mood for, you know. I'm a mood reader, I'll pick up what I fancy. So anyway, enough of the talking and let's just get right into the books, okay? So if I could describe what my summer was like, reading wise, it was random.
I am so random, I can't believe I just did that.
Library loan heavy, we love it. Conscious Queen, and sprinkled in with the odd audiobook, because two things I wanted to do more of this year is read more from the library or thrift, which I've been an absolute star, gold star for me. I have been doing that, and I wanted to listen to more audiobooks, which she has been. So June. I only read 3 books in June because Mother arrived into Liverpool, and by Mother I mean Taylor Swift. So, you know, she was busy with that, hosting duties, making sure I was dressed, ready to see Mother. I also got sick, so they're the excuses of why I only read 3 books that month. And I also found I was like, after I was sick, I went into a bit of a reading slump. So 3 books was good, considering, you know, she was unwell, Mother arrived, and she was in a reading slump. So the first book I read was Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. And this was the first Julia Armfield that I read, and I'd seen a lot of people saying they loved it. It was weird, and I was like, weird you say? And if you're not familiar, it follows a same-sex married couple, Miri and Leah, whose marriage is tested and sort of pushed to a breaking point when Leah comes back from a deep sea mission.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
She does something down in the water, the ocean. I'm not going to pretend to know what science goes on down there. Marine biologist? Question mark. But she gets stranded on this mission, and after 6 months they're rescued, and she comes back changed, some would say. And this was one of the more unique books I've read so far this year. It was very sort of mysterious, eerie. There was like a real sense of impending doom, and I was just like, oh, this is feeling a bit creepy. But if you're into mysterious stories, unusual female characters, a puzzling setting with a sense of impending doom, then I'd say check it out. But if you're not a fan of the ocean or it scares you, which it scares me, the deep sea, and I still read it, but yeah, I'd probably give it a miss, because after I read it I was just kind of like, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable with the thought of what goes on down in the deep ocean. So yeah, you wouldn't catch me on a submarine.
No ma'am.
And I rated that one 4 stars. The next book I read was a non-fiction, and that is Stiff by Mary Roach, a book I thrifted. And I picked this up because I could feel myself after I was sick going into a reading slump. So I needed something that would sort of pique my curiosities, and this certainly did the job. And if you're not familiar with Mary Roach, she writes popular science books about sort of the human experience and human anatomy with kind of like humour. And this book focuses on death. Yeah, you may be saying, Rachel, that sounds a bit dark and macabre, and yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you, it is. But also it's funny and like interesting because of the way Mary Roach writes about it. It focuses on, yes, cadavers, but it's more sort of intriguing and interesting because she goes into historical and what happens to cadavers or the human body when it's donated to science, and the types of experiments that scientists way back when would carry out. And it's all very unsettling but very interesting. It's like, you know, when you're looking at something and you're like, oh, but you can't look away, a bit like that, but reading.
Okay, work.
It shocked me, it scared me, and it made me laugh, and I was like, now I'm not in a reading slump. And the final book that I read in June was an audiobook, and that is Say Nothing, A True Story of Murder and Memory by Patrick Radden Keefe. And I'd wanted to read this for a while. Earlier on in the year I was watching a lot of documentaries about Irish history with the Troubles, and it's something that I didn't fully understand and I wanted to know more. So this book was recommended to me. I decided to listen to it on audiobook because I find listening to non-fiction on audiobook very gripping and almost like I'm listening to a podcast. But this book focuses on the harsh realities and the people who were impacted during this time, and it switches between different characters, people who were committing crimes, people who were impacted by crimes, and how that period in history shaped a lot of people in Ireland and changed their lives forever. And Patrick Radden Keefe has just a very interesting, engaging way of writing that feels like a journalistic thriller in a sense, and you're gripped, you feel connected to the characters. He approaches the characters in a very like humanistic way, which I really liked. I'm really glad that I listened to it on audiobook because it was very shocking, a lot of the things that I was listening to. It felt quite vivid listening to it as well because it was narrated by an Irish person, so I just felt very immersed in the story, and I rated that 5 stars. Plus it's been adapted based off that book, and it's coming out like later this year I believe, so I will definitely be watching it. On to July. This was a much better reading month for me. I read one extra book, much better, read one extra book. But I was out of the reading slump and I felt like I was getting into the groove of things a bit more. Do you know when you're like out of a reading slump and you're like, oh, I'm getting back into the swing of things now. I'm learning the choreo. Funny. So the first book that I read was, I read 4 books. 2 were library books and 1 was an audio and 1 was gifted to me, I think. The first book was Trespasses by Louise Kennedy, one of my favourite reads of the whole year. I absolutely loved and thought this was a beautiful story. And it's also set in Ireland during the Troubles, so as you can see I was still on my Irish journey. And I was really glad that I read Say Nothing prior because it really informed the world that I was about to enter with this story, and I felt really immersed even more than I would be. So I highly recommend reading something about the Troubles prior if you wanted to read this. And this is, as I said, set during the Troubles, and it's essentially a love story between 2 people who are on opposite sides of the conflict both politically and religiously. But not only is it a love story of sort of doomed from the start, but it's also about class, religion, love and loyalties in sort of a dark period in time. I absolutely loved Louise Kennedy's writing. I just found it very moving, and I particularly like the way she writes about the working class characters and the world that they inhabit. It's very sort of true to what I recall, like growing up. Obviously I weren't alive during the 80s, but still those type of dynamics are still part of families. But yeah, I highly recommend that book. I gave it 5 stars. 5 stars across the board, and I highly recommend you all read it. Go read it now. And it's also a book that I'd love to see adapted. I think it'd be really powerful as a film, but you know, she's not a producer, is she, Sam? The next book I read was Sociopath by Patrick Gagney. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And this was, as I've mentioned, gifted to me by Simon from Savage Reads. And this book was a bit meh for me. I sort of had more high expectations, but as a memoir, it felt a bit guarded. But I appreciated that it was tackling something we hadn't seen before, talking about mental health and a mental illness that's not really been addressed much or spoken about without a lot of sort of shame. But we follow the author through her childhood into adulthood as she comes to terms with the fact that she's different, and she discovers that she's a sociopath, and how that discovery sort of helped her but also impacted her life as she got older and came to terms with it. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, I found this book to have a bit of a detached quality, which I have seen people say that it was intended, but it didn't feel like it was to me.
I said what I said!
Plus, I felt it was a bit guarded for a memoir, and obviously people can share what they want, it's their life, but I think to really connect with the person, they kind of can't be guarded in a memoir. And I also felt like she moved on far too quickly from her childhood years, which were the most interesting, I'd say, because that was before she had the awareness of what was wrong with her, and she focused way too much on the life in LA as an adult and sort of the glitziness of being in LA and in the music industry. But the aspect of the book that I didn't like the most was that she kind of skirts past the fact that she's an incredibly privileged white woman who has access to all of these things, and other than one time in the book, sort of in like a couple of sentences that she mentions it, she never mentions how that had helped her, how she was able to go through the world in sort of sheltered because of the privileges she was afforded, wealth, access to healthcare, easily getting a job because of who her dad was, and the fact that she was an attractive blonde white woman. So yeah, it came across as a bit sort of tone deaf at times, which I was just like, I have seen some people really enjoyed it and they thought it was brave that she'd written about it, but it wasn't really the type of memoir I like, unfortunately. Next was a library book that I got and returned, so I don't have it, sorry, and that was Lemon by Kwon Yeo-Sun, and I rated this 3.5, which I'm telling you now because if I don't tell you now I'll forget to. And yeah, this was a book that I picked up kind of on a whim at the library, but I had seen a few people who I follow on Bookstagram reading it, and it's a Korean mystery set in 2000, in the summer of 2002 to be more specific, when a young high school girl is killed, and it's told from multiple perspectives over various time frames, and how this death impacted those that were kind of close to her or impacted by her death. And it focuses on loss, grief, and how secrets unravel throughout time. I did enjoy this more than I didn't, but I found it was a bit sparse at times as it was only 176 pages. It did have impact for those pages, but I would have kind of enjoyed more where we went more into the characters' lives and what they were like. But I still found it quite gripping and mysterious for such a short novel. The next was a book I listened to on audio, and that was The Mystery Guest by Nita Prose. This is a sequel, if you're not aware, of the book The Maid, also by Nita Prose, which I read last year, I think. Or was it the year before? Either way, I really enjoyed that book. I found the character of Molly the maid very unusual. Social cues aren't a strong point, and she's very like focused on one task at hand. It's kind of hinted at that she may be on the spectrum, but it's never confirmed. But she was a very intriguing and engaging character in the first book, and I do think the strongest thing about the story is that character. But yeah, I just listened to this for something light and easy. Unfortunately, I found it kind of Rubbish, sorry. This again follows the same sort of premise, set at the hotel. A death happens and it's kind of like a murder mystery, but the setting and the story, it felt too recycled, it felt far-fetched, it wasn't as gripping as the first, and the main issue is it just felt like a cash grab. The publisher had just been like, let's do that again, but a bit different, and people who enjoyed it will listen to it, or read it, sorry. So yeah, I found it kind of disappointing and far-fetched and unbelievable. And the last book that I read in July was Mongrel by Hanoko Footman, another library book I got, and I picked this up like literally the week that it was released from the library. And this book follows 3 women. May, who loses a mother when she's a child, and she grows up in suburban Surrey and sort of is caught between who she wants to be, or who she was, and who she's supposed to be. She tries to suppress her heritage and fit in with the people who she grows up around, while also struggling with her identity and sexuality. Then we also follow Yuki, who moves from the Japanese countryside to the UK to pursue her dreams of being a musician in an orchestra, until she falls pregnant and her dreams are kind of pushed to the sidelines as she struggles and tries to cope with being a young mother. And we also follow Haruka, who leaves a small town in Japan for the big city. She moves to Tokyo and is drawn into the hostess culture and the sort of seedy underbelly of the nightlife there. And the book alternates throughout between the 3 characters and interweaves the story expertly, may I add, and showcases the similarities and experiences of these women. But each character's very much their own, and you're gripped for each of their stories and how it's going to end. It's heartbreaking and very touching, and I just really adored this book, and it will definitely be in the top 10 of what I read this year. It was a really beautiful story on identity, class, heritage, culture, sexuality, and what family bonds mean. You just need to read it. On to August. Another decent month for me. I'd say I average between 4 and 5 books. That's like a sort of good average for me. I'd say I'm kind of a slow reader, so I don't read particularly fast. If I read 5+ books, then that's a really good reading month for me. Again, I read 4 books, 3 physical books and 1 audio. And the first book I read was My Husband by Ventura. And I thrifted this book off Vinted for like £3 after it was recommended to me a whole lot. And yes, it's unhinged women at its finest. And the girlies really came through with that one when I said, can I have some unhinged recommendations, please? And they were like, yeah. And this book follows a French woman who's obsessed, enamoured if you will, with a husband and sort of trying to keep the spark in the marriage alive and being the best wife she can be. And she will do whatever it takes to keep that passion in the marriage alive. Also, she'll have you believing. It's written in a sort of inner monologue style, and you're only getting her point of view, and at times it's like really funny because it's so unhinged, the lengths that she'll go to and the things that she picks up on. But it's quite dark and dry as well at times. But I did literally laugh out loud with some of the things she was doing because they were ridiculous. So if you're into strange female protagonists, think Night Bitch, Gone Girl, then you need to read this. One of the more unhinged female protagonists that I've read recently, this year particularly. And you know what, I'm here for it. Also, there's a twist at the end which left me gagged. The next book I read was an audiobook, another Patrick Radden Keefe book, and that is Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty. And as I mentioned, I really love listening to non-fiction on audiobook. So if you've got any good non-fiction recommendations you'll think I like, let me know in the comments, because I'm always looking for something to listen to, if it's a podcast, an audiobook. And this book's about the opioid crisis, but more specifically about the family that benefited, created, and essentially orchestrated the opioid crisis. Don't sue me. Allegedly, ? Don't sue me, please don't sue me. Similar to Say Nothing, this is told in a very enthralling, engaging way for such sort of heavy subject matter and a lot of information that you're being given. And we're told from the beginning to the end the Sackler dynasty and how they came to America, got involved in business, started from the bottom and worked their way up to being sort of the top of the pharmaceutical industry, and how they wanted to create a drug that was going to make them incredibly rich, and they certainly did that, but at what cost?
She's got a point.
It's interspersed as well with people that had been impacted by the opioid crisis and how people were trying to warn and also alert the pharmaceutical industry about what they could see was going to happen, but nobody listened because too much of this was flowing. It'll make you angry, it'll get you enraged, but it'll also open your eyes to the realities and the security that is afforded you if you're incredibly wealthy, and the power as well that comes with that wealth. Of course, they got away with murder, but you know, it's what happens when you're privy. I rated that 5 stars, and if you did read this and enjoy it, I highly recommend a TV show that is based on another book called Dope Sick. I thought it was incredibly powerful TV. The next book is a library book that I got, and that is The Guest by Emma Cline, and I picked this up because I'd seen people say it was kind of summery. It's set in the summer and I wanted something gripping, a bit mysterious, summery, and I'd read her other book, The Girls, which I really enjoyed a few years ago, so yeah, I kind of just picked it up and said, let's see what this is about. And it's set in Long Island at the end of summer, and we follow Alex, who's living with a much older man, a much older wealthy man in his like summer home. She's got sort of an arrangement with him, wink wink, and she's kind of reckless and sort of living in the moment, and something happens that makes him ask her to leave, and she's like, I don't really want to go back to the city because there's stuff there I don't want to have to deal with, so I'm just going to hang around here for a bit and maybe he'll change his mind? Question mark. So she's left stranded in Long Island, and she gets into various different interactions and weird situations as she tries to sort of befriend people and scheme and lie away into these social circles and befriend people who she can manipulate and sort of use so that she can try and make things up to her sugar daddy. I found this book mysterious, it was gripping, the summer setting really came through, and it felt sort of a hazy summer novel, and it really lended itself to the fact that she was feeling frustrated and didn't have many options, and the heat just sort of amplified it, and it had something to say about class and access and wealth and how, you know, it can be used against you essentially, especially when you're sort of desperate. And the character of Alex is just really rich and you just want to know more about her. She's incredibly messy, unlikable, a bit questionable at times, but you can't help read it and kind of root for her as well. So possibly one of my favourite characters of the year with Alex in that book. Next was another library book that I read, and that is Little Rot by Akwaeke Emezi. I hope I've pronounced that right, sorry if I haven't. And unfortunately I really did not like this book, and it got 2.5 stars. So I'll tell you why. And I'd read this author's other book, You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty, a few years back, and I quite enjoyed it at the beginning, but it sort of lost me halfway through, so I wanted to give them another chance, and I picked this one up. It's set in Nigeria. We follow a group of sort of friends that are interconnected, and 2 of them break up, sort of leading to a spiral of destruction. They're going to parties, they're going out drinking, and it also leads to the discovery of this dark underbelly of the city where a party is happening, a secret party where, you know, anything can happen, and there are high profile figures there who are getting up to bad things. And the premise, when I'm sort of reiterating it to you now, it does sound really thrilling, but unfortunately it just didn't carry that way in the story. I felt like the book lacked a central focus that sort of weaved throughout, and there were too many characters for me. I felt like we could have done with maybe like 2 or 3 central characters. There were too many getting introduced that it was kind of pulling away from the connection I was trying to have with these other characters and their involvement. And because there were so many characters, they felt kind of underdeveloped, and I also felt like the characters had too many sort of similar dynamics dynamics. We were kind of getting little crumbs of like the dark undertone of the story beneath, but it was kind of glossed over for lots of like spicy content, and I was just like, what? So the concept was there, but I just feel like the execution needed a bit more development. Will I read another one of their books again? Perhaps, I'm not ruling it out, but I need a good one. You're going to have to tell me a good one in the comments. And the final book that I read this summer was Piglet by Lottie Hazel, and I got it from the library also. And this book falls into the sort of messy women genre. You could also say female rage genre. And we follow Piglet, that's her childhood nickname, whose life's seemingly perfect. She's sort of got the perfect job, she's engaged to be married, they've just bought a house, shopping at Waitrose, money bags, but she's sort of happy with how far she's come. It's implied that she comes from more of a working class background and she wants more than what she had growing up. That is until her fiance confesses to something terrible that he did 2 weeks before the wedding, and her life sort of sent into spiral, and she's torn between going ahead with it and achieving this dream life she wants, or calling it off and having to start all over again. And the book uses food and appetite for certain things in a very unusual way, so it showcases sort of her issues with food, but also her hunger for certain things in life, material elements, possessions, status, through that sort of food related imagery. And it's a great character study of a woman that's at the end of a rope.
I've had it officially.
And the last like 100 pages she kind of like goes off, and I was seated, the popcorn was out. So yeah, that was everything I read during the summer months. I'm pretty sure the majority of the books weren't even what I planned to read, but as I said, you know, she's a mood reader. And I've loved mixing library books, thrifted books and audiobooks into my sort of rotation this summer, and it's something I'm going to continue with. So let me know in the comments if you've read any of these or they're on your radar. What were some of your favourite reads of the summer, and do you have like a list that you stick to? Let me know in the comments. I'm always curious to see what people are reading and what they're enjoying. If you made it this far, thank you so much. You're an icon. Yeah, you are. You're an icon. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe because it helps me out. As always, I appreciate you all and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.